there! My name is Brent, and behind me is the former mining town of Cerro Gordo. I've been living up in this town since March of 2020, and I spend my days just exploring the mines, fixing up some old buildings, and trying to learn everything that I can about this place. This past year's been huge for the town. We made a ton of progress rebuilding a hotel, we felt Mother Nature's wrath, we hosted a bunch of amazing people, and a whole lot more. And in this past month, I've really dove deeper into history here that I never knew. I explored areas I had never been to. We started some new cabin sites and a whole lot more. So let's check it out. All right, so 2022 is coming to a close and I am still living here at Cerro Gordo. I first moved to this abandoned mining town in March of 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. I thought I'd move out here, spend a couple weeks, maybe a month, ride it out, then return to my normal life in Austin. And almost 3 years later, here I am, still living here. And I think that idea of normal has changed a lot. Normal to me these days is being here. This is my home. Normal is dealing with no running water. Normal is dealing with, abandoned buildings. Normal is dealing with abandoned mines. Normal is having tons of people from all over the place come up and help see this mission through. And I think during that time, I've changed so much, this town has changed so much, and just my experience within the town has changed as well. It went from a very solo mission to a very shared mission to a very overwhelming mission, and kind of all the fluctuations there within. And this month was no different. This month had that perfect balance of progress and peace. We started on some new cabins, found some really cool artifacts from the past, went on some new explorations, but at the same time had that time to just relax and dive into the history here. I learned things in the past month about this town that I never knew that I think are gonna lead me on my biggest adventures yet. So with all that, let's dive into everything happening around here over the past month or so. So in today, Cerro Gordo had thousands of residents living up here. So you have to imagine thousands of people living on top of a mountain for decades, just consuming lots of things means lots of items from the past are discarded all around these hills around me. And over the past couple of years, anytime we cut in a road or use the excavator, it seems that these bottles kind of pop out of nowhere. And during that time, bottles have just become a cool hobby of mine. And so just a couple weeks ago, we were up here, digging right here with Trevor and Phil, and we came across a stash. And there's some really cool wine bottles, whiskey bottles, plus a bottle that might be my favorite bottle find yet, and one that taught me so much about a brand that I think a lot of us know, but maybe not all of us know the whole history of.
C. Conrad and Company, original Budweiser.
Holy Is it? No way. Holy
That's cool.
Dude, that might be like the first Budweiser ever. I've never seen a Budweiser with like an applied lip.
Wow.
That's 1800s.
What the
I guess the can isn't lying.
God damn.
Conrad and Co.
Hey,
Budweiser?
Yeah.
We're gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, Conrad and Co.'s Budweiser. CCC.
My dad, but I'm pretty sure I have no signal up here.
Yeah, I don't have a signal either. Back in the 1870s, a guy named Carl Conrad took a trip into Europe. And he was traveling around, and somewhere in Bohemia, which is in the Czech Republic, he drank a beer that he described as the best beer he'd ever had. So Carl hightailed it back to the United States, set up a company. He was friends with a guy named Adolphus Busch, who you may know from the Anheuser-Busch, empire at this point. And so with Mr. Busch, they sat down, created this formula, and then Carl Conrad decided to call the company Budweiser after a city in Bavaria named Budweis. So with that, Carl Conrad incorporated Budweiser, and he came out with this in 1876. And pretty much immediately from my reading, it was a hit. It was described as the best beer in the market. It was lighter than the other beers. It was more flavorful than the other beers. It was just a booming success. And so with that, we know that this bottle at its oldest is from 1876. But we know that at the newest, this bottle is from 1883, because in 1883, even through all his success, Carl Conrad went bankrupt. And the reason that he went bankrupt is a variety of reasons. You know, some say it was bottling issues. They were running out of these bottles and they couldn't fill them up quick enough. Some say it was a variety of other reasons, that he had spread himself too thin. In the bankruptcy proceedings, Carl Conrad gave the name Budweiser and the formula to the Anheuser-Busch company, you know, because his friend helped him create it back in the day. He took a job for the rest of his life at Anheuser-Busch, and that is the story, the Budweiser that we know. And I imagine a lot of you out there have known or drank a Budweiser, but probably not very many of you know about Carl Conrad. So I think that that interesting kind of wormhole that this bottle led me down is cool. You know, this place has a lot of history to it, a lot of secrets, and one that I just can't wait to continue uncovering as the years pass by. So now that things are properly cold, we're talking, you know, in the teens with 60-mile-per-hour winds some days, I've been spending a lot more time indoors, just researching Cerro Gordo's past. And recently, a guy named Robert Sloan emailed me, and he proposed some new information that he found digging around in some historical newspaper archives. Two things that, if we can figure it out, would not only just complete the picture of Cerro Gordo's history more, it could just leave me on an adventure of a lifetime. So the first thing that Robert pointed out was this distinction that appears in the newspapers around the 1870s between Upper and Lower Cerro Gordo. And the second item that Robert brought up was the existence of this Potosi Tunnel. But this tunnel supposedly would intersect every major mine here at Cerro Gordo. And the big key was a prospectus from 1874 put together by the one and only John Simpson. And John Simpson was the owner of the original American Hotel up here at Cerro Gordo. This prospectus outlines the idea of putting a tunnel beginning in Lower Cerro Gordo and cutting through the bottom of all of these major tunnels to potentially get more ore that they hadn't extracted before. They outlined the cost of being about $97,000, and by their math, if they did it right, they'd be making about $100,000 a month using this new tunnel. But if this thing exists, and I was somehow able to get access into it, it could potentially unlock just unlimited amounts of explorations, unlimited amounts of new discoveries, unlimited amounts of new appreciation of this, you know, massive mine that somehow had not been discussed in all the other books I had looked into. So with all of that, you know, that excitement, I decided to take the Kubota, head down to the Lower Cerro Gordo, and see if I could find some of these landmarks that Robert had been talking about. All right, so now we're down in the area that might have been referred to as the Lower Cerro Gordo. So the first thing we were looking for was something put in by the U.S. mineral marker, so USMM, and it was Armagh or something to that effect. And apparently this was put in by William Crapo in 1880 to signify the marker where he wanted to be. Now, if you look at this post, it says Armagh, USMM. So this is it. This is the marker that we were looking for, because there's a lot of other coordinates that talk about how far they are from this marker. So as far as a first clue, this is a great first clue. And so this is from, believe it or not, 1880. Pretty surprising that it's still standing today. And it would have been put in by William Crapo. And if any of you guys know the history of Cerro Gordo, Crapo ended in a very dramatic fashion with a murder outside the American Hotel, went on the run, and then apparently was never seen again. All right, so we were just walking around, and in the prospectus for the Potosi or the Potosi Tunnel, it shows one illustration, which are never perfect, you know, because it's like a rendering, but it shows a furnace right next to the tunnel. And after finding the original adobe furnace up there, this looks like a more modern furnace. You know, so they would have been using the brick. You can tell down there they had better intake. And so if this is the furnace that they used in that Potosi prospectus, that would mean that the tunnel should be right over here-ish, almost in the wash. There is a little mine entrance over there I can see, but it seems like this would have been bigger and I've been going that way. All right, so just over from the furnace now. Right here, you can kind of see an A-frame that might have been the entrance to a mine. There's a lot of equipment down here. You can see some of this. There's this cable that almost looks like it would have been a mini tramway down there. You know, we're obviously standing on top of a tailings pile. You can see that by standing up here. So some of the waste rock coming out of the mine or the tunnel. And this cable going up here makes me believe that they're kind of bringing some stuff from up here, bringing it down there. You can kind of see a flat spot down there, potentially doing even more refining over there. I'm gonna check this out quickly, but I assume this just maybe goes 5 feet in or so, if that. Yeah, that was just a little prospect. They never went any further in. But all the signs are showing that this was a pretty big operation back in the day. So far, it seems very industrial. And there's another flat spot over here that could have been the entrance to the mine. But with the cable, it almost seems like maybe they were taking ore from even higher up, because this cable was behind this, and maybe this A-frame was just a support system for this cable. You know, again, you can see some here. Lots of clues. So after the trip down there, it seems like all of the clues are stacking up. You know, it does seem like lower Cerro Gordo was an area just below the main town that was down by the Ignacio mine that at one point was a booming town of its own with stores and residences and plenty of mines. And so this excitement over the possibility of there being so much more to this town led me to the University of California, Riverside. And they just have a huge online archive of basically every newspaper that was published in the 1800s, really easy to access. I remember sitting there for hours and hours and hours, scrolling through thousands of articles. And in these articles, you have new murders that I never heard of, you know, new robberies that were front page news, new business ventures that I had never heard of. I've forgotten how much learning these stories just brings me to life. You know, it feels like they give me a new thread to go down, you know, a new thing to get excited about year after year, you know, month over month. It just, another story always exists here. And so with that, let's jump out and see what's going on all around the property. So over the years, Cerro Gordo has had its fair share of important and infamous characters of the past. You know, there's guys like Mortimer Belshaw, who I've talked a lot about, that really turned this place from a small camp into just a booming mining town. There's Victor Beaudry, you know, who partnered with Belshaw on many things, who had the general store here and just etched his name into the history books. You know, but there's so many other names that were equally, if not more important in their day, that have been seemingly just lost to history. But over the last few months, as I've been spending more and more time researching some of the history books here, I've learned more about William Hunter, the man who built this cabin behind me, and the man that not just this cabin's named after, but now has Hunter Canyon, Hunter Mountain, Hunter Ranch, and all sorts of other things. Hunter, after the war in 1865, made his way west, just like a lot of the soldiers did. You know, he's looking for riches, excitement, his next big strike. So after he made his way to California, he found his way to Owens Valley, and shortly thereafter he started hearing these rumors of this booming mining town of Cerro Gordo. So he came up here, he set up shop, and not long after being here, he purchased the Belmont mine. And the Belmont mine is just a huge mine located about 3 miles east of here. And if you go over there, there's still ruins of this massive operation back in the day. You know, Hunter set up shop right behind me here. And so to get between Cerro Gordo and the Belmont mine, he started buying mules. And so before he knew it, this pack of mules had grown to about 200 that he needed to take care of. You know, they needed water and they needed grazing. So at that point, Hunter started thinking, hey, I need a bigger place for these animals to graze. So about 20 miles from here, in between Panamint Valley and Saline Valley, Hunter found a piece of land. You know, it was lush, it had trees, there was rivers, it was just the perfect place to graze. So he bought what would become the Hunter Ranch. So what I want to do in this video is go from the Hunter's cabin here at Cerro Gordo all the way over to Hunter's Ranch, almost in Saline Valley. We're gonna take the same trail that he would have taken in between Cerro Gordo and the Belmont. These days, that wide trail has narrowed down to pretty much a single lane track for a dirt bike. I've never been there before, but I kind of want to sit and just bask and just understand the landscape and the mindset that this guy would have gone through, you know, bringing his mules all the way over there and all the way over here. So right now we're at the beginning of what's called the Belmont Loop, and the Belmont Loop is how Hunter would have gotten his ore back from the Belmont to Cerro Gordo to be refined. So all the footage you see of this dirt bike ride from here to the Belmont would have been the exact same route that Hunter would have taken all of his mules and all of his ores between the 3 or 4 miles between the Belmont and Cerro Gordo. So with that, let's hit it. We got the bike. We're gonna try to go on this little route and go down there. All right, so we're just getting down to the Belmont mine, and you can see a lot of stone structures around from the old mine. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a long time, you might remember one of my very first videos. I went on a hike to an unknown mine that I didn't know too much about. And when I got there, I needed to make a home. I ended up making my house out of stones and basically creating a coffin to then sleep underneath to try to keep warm. And here it is. I haven't been back here since, so it's probably been going on 2 years, but it looks like my fire ring is still here. I remember sitting right there giving a speech about being in investment banking as the sun was going down behind me. It's hilarious seeing this now. You can see the sun is already peaking, and I probably still have 20 miles to go out of here. We need to go almost over that canyon to the next canyon. So I'm gonna start hitting it, but this is the Belmont mine, and this is where I stayed, almost 2 years ago. Crazy to think how much life has changed since then. After all that, back here in this woods, we're here, the Hunter Cabin. So we went from Hunter Cabin to Hunter Cabin. So this would have been part of his ranch where he had a lot of mules around and there's water sources. And the mountain is named after him just over there. And look at the difference in two things. One, the view. Obviously much more heavily wooded over here than his cabin was at Cerro Gordo. And two, the construction methods. You know, over here, he obviously wasn't hauling in much material, so he's just chopping down the trees and made more of a traditional log cabin type thing. I haven't been in here, but it seems like it's being maintained. And there you go. Mr. Hunter's cabin. It's so cool to be in here and just look at this hand-carved wood and how many strikes it took to make every single one of these. You know, there's so many little hatchet marks that were required to make these walls. And I think that Hunter, you know, the same guy that at Cerro Gordo, where he got his start, was out here doing this. This is super cool for me. You know, and if you look, back in the day, they insulated with anything. Insulated with bags, with, of course, the classic denim, anything you could to try to stay warm. And it just brings it so much to life for me to be here, to look at this, and to imagine, you know, William Hunter sitting in here, thinking about Cerro Gordo, Thinking about all those other things that he had going on. I really love it here. All right, so we're back here at the Hunter's Cabin at Cerro Gordo, and inside I want to show you what we're working on. You know, something that we've wanted to do pretty much since day one here is incorporate music in what we do long term. You know, music has been part of this town for 150 years, from Beaudry's brass band to the harps to the different performers that would come through the town, and that's just an energy that we always want here. You know, I remember on the very first day we bought the place, saying in an article that we wanted to build music studios up here. You know, it's been a few years since then, but we're finally here. You know, the plan with the Hunter's Cabin is to transform it into a music studio to allow different artists to come up here, you know, get inspired by the space, the history, and just continue to create beautiful projects in this town. Unfortunately, I don't know that much about building music studios, so we're gonna go inside and meet somebody that does. Haley Dahl has been making music for a very long time. She's recorded an album inside of caves, and she is up here to transform this building behind me into a music studio.
Hi, my name is Haley Dahl. I'm a musician based out of New York and Los Angeles. I'm really excited for this project. I first came to Cerro Gordo about 2 years ago when I was doing a long-term music project that involved recording in caves. I just think it's a really special place. I think that people who come here to record will have amazing experiences here that are going to become embedded in the work that they make. If you are somebody who builds studios and wants to consult, if you're a producer who wants to eventually be involved with the project, an artist who wants to record here, if you have any recording gear or musical instruments that are studio quality that you want to donate, send an email to studio@cerrogordomines.com. And we would love to involve as many people as want to be involved.
All right, so probably the biggest update over the last year or so is this structure that I'm standing in front of. That is the basement of the future American Hotel. And I have tons of videos just showing how hard that thing was to build. You know, from the logistics, from Mother Nature, and then just the community of people that rallied behind it to make it happen. And I just wanted to give a quick update on what's next. You know, next step in the hotel is framing. And framing is something that I would have loved to already started, but as these things happen, the architect and the engineer and our framer decided they wanted to change a few things about how it's gonna be built. You know, nothing makes me more frustrated than kind of seeing anything come to a little bit of a standstill. But the plans are now approved, we're moving forward, and I gotta say, the moment that the first board is laid, I'm gonna make a huge update video. The second loop that I kind of wanted to close over the last few videos is related to our road. We have been hit by not just one, but 2,000-year floods over the last few months that just completely wiped out our road. You know, it was devastating at the time, but we rolled up our sleeves, we fixed it enough to get the hotel basement done, and since then the county's come back out, they've graded it, it's pretty much back to normal. Hopefully it stays that way so we can bring up all the lumber for the framing, but at this point, the road's good, the hotel is about to start framing, and with that, let's get into all the new things that have been going on here over the past month or so. So as I've been waiting for this hotel to continue, I started just thinking about new cabin sites, you know, new campsites to put in for the future. You know, this property is almost 350 acres. So my hope one day is to, yes, of course have the hotel, but have about 10 campsites spread throughout the land, and then about 10 cabins as well. And so one place that I haven't spent much time over the past couple years is back here. This is the backside of Cerro Gordo, you know, which was once known as Newtown or Chinatown. When I first came up here, I used to take these hikes along the trail right to my right. And it's this beautiful old miner's trail with all these old stone cabins on it. And one of my favorite things to do in the world was to hike out there, sit at the very end of the road, way past the cabins, and just watch the sunrise over Death Valley. It was just among the most beautiful sunrises I had ever seen in my life. You know, my idea was to create a cabin that would be small enough where it would be easy to put up, it would be portable, and ideally it would have a clear roof, you know? I want to put something back there to test out the space, you know, leave it there for a season and then be able to move it somewhere else and try out somewhere else for a season. And so with that, I made my way to Home Depot and I started creating what will be a tiny little structure under 100 square feet that ideally is movable with a skid steer so that way I can test out different cabin sites throughout the years and truly get an understanding of where they should be and maybe where some should not be. All right, so we're out here at the end of this little path coming from town, and this is gonna be the site of this cabin with a clear roof. You know, it's gotta be about a 10 by 10 size pad, so we're gonna make a little bigger pad so for some balconies. But imagine this view every morning, waking up seeing this, looking up to seeing the stars. So step one is Trevor over here is gonna clear this out. We're gonna start building the foundation for it, and I think this thing can go pretty quick. But a lot of space back here, very secluded, very peaceful. Very excited to have something going on back here. So first, shout out Kubota. You know, they've been a huge help over the last 3 or 4 months. You know, we wouldn't be getting any of the progress done that we are without having Kubota on board. You know, we fixed the road because of this. We've cut in roads because of this. We've gotten the cement poured with these. These have just been the biggest help ever. And the plan today is to try to get this floor at least done, and we'll go from there. All right, so this is the basic floor. Once it gets screwed together, got the pressure treated lumber. We'll make the box and we'll be able to position the box. Probably more backset here. Overlooking that, but it's getting there. You know, the backside of Cerro Gordo is one that's always seemed important, you know, yet untapped in a way. You know, so many structures exist in the town core, but I think over time, if we're looking at it in decades, the backside of Cerro Gordo, everything behind me is going to become just a beautiful place for a lot of people to spend time. So I'm really excited to wrap that up and see what this first snowfall might look like. Back in the heyday, Cerro Gordo was a collection of about a dozen or so mines. The largest of these mines was the Union Mine. And that was responsible for the majority of the $500 million worth of minerals they pulled out of these hills. And the most definitive guide about these mines was written in 1963 by the United States Geological Society. And a team spent months just meticulously documenting all the different mines around here, the rock formations, and what should be the different winzes and tunnels. And over the past couple of years, as I've explored more and more of these mines, I found that there's two problems. One, there's areas that they described in 1963 as inaccessible. And so I think what they said as inaccessible meant anything that required rope. Second, there's a lot of areas that are outlined in this guide that are no longer accessible. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've been going down a tunnel, expecting it to branch off and lead to another area, and there's a collapse. And so that means that these mines are actively collapsing. You know, in another 60 years, who knows how much of these mines will be available. And to me, that just struck me as something to document. So that kind of inspired me to create the most definitive guide to Cerro Gordo's mines as of 2022. So what that means is going to mean new technology like using 3D scanning, polycam. It's going to mean old school stuff like a pencil and some paper. It's also going to mean a tape measure and just things like that. And of course, video. So about a year ago, I had these guys come up called the Corridor Crew. And the Corridor Crew are a collection of guys who are just special effects geniuses. And they wanted to come up here to Cerro Gordo to try to bring some of the mines to life. And with them, they brought a guy named Chris. And Chris is the founder of Polycam, which is a 3D mapping app. And Polycam uses LiDAR technology. And LiDAR is basically an infrared light that goes around and it captures objects and shapes and dimensions, making it suitable for 3D mapping. And so the idea would be if you were to bring the Polycam app through a mine, it would capture dimensions, it would capture shapes, it would capture everything and preserve it forever. And so in this experiment, what I wanted to do was to compare Polycam to the old school tape measure and pencil. That's how they would have done it with the USGS report. And so to me, I wanted to compare this old technology to the new technology, see which was easier, more reliable, and all things like that. One thing I think has been so amazing with this channel is just all the input. So if you're out there and this is your expertise, if you map things for a living, please do leave a comment below. Right now I'm thinking between either Polycam and a tape measure. If you have tips for using either of these better, I'd love to hear that too. I think together and all combined, we could create the most definitive map of these mines for a very long time to come. All right, I'm a little further back down one of the shafts, and I might have just figured out something about the mapping that might push the 3D mapping over to the next level. If you look down here, you see an old fuse, and then what I can only assume is blasting caps. Yeah, I can see the blasting caps inside of there. So those you can take off your fingers very easy, so we won't get too close to those. But with a tape measure, I'm never capturing artifacts like that. And with a 3D mapping, that should render even the artifacts in place where they are dimensionally as well. So, side note, blasting caps exist to create a little blast, a little boom, because dynamite needs a little bit of an explosion to get the nitroglycerin going. And so the fuse would burn into a blasting cap, like one of those over there, and that would pop and that would explode dynamite. All right, now that I'm coming to the end of the 0 level, and I've had a decent amount of time to try the tape measure and the 3D mapping, it seems pretty clear that the 3D mapping is a better way to go. It's capturing dimensions. It's capturing not just dimensions, but it's capturing imagery. It's capturing artifacts in their place, and it's already digitized. So I already have a way to maneuver it and manipulate it digitally. So this is like a big deal. I think this is a really exciting project. It just makes me pumped up because it gives me more purpose in all the explorations. It's not just exploring for exploring's sake, which I've done for so many years. It's now a pretty ambitious project. It's to create the most definitive guide of these mines over the next few years, which I think will just be so immensely valuable to future generations. All right, so obviously this project is going to take a really long time. To map all of the Union Mine, it's going to take months. I'm super excited about it because at the end of those months, we're gonna have a perfect digital archive of exactly what these mines are like today. So future generations can not just read in the book, but they can see exactly what the different levels of this mine were like. To me, that's really exciting. It's probably the project that I'm second most exciting for in this coming year. When I think forward to all the projects that are coming this next year, I can't help but think back to this past year and all of that we got done. So as this year comes to a close, I can't help but just reflect. And when I think back to 2020 at Cerro Gordo, I feel like years here are just a little bit like dog years. There's 7 years of experience in every year here. And this year has been no different. It's been a year filled with some of the most joyful moments of my life. Times when people came together to pull off the impossible. When hurdles were raised, we just kept jumping higher. And each year that passes up here is somehow easier and harder at the same time. Easier because you build that resilience that's earned through time on a difficult project. Harder because you realize the finish line that you initially laid out is going to be constantly pushed. When I look back over the last year, I think of all the specific experiences, these experiences that I couldn't have gotten even with 7 years somewhere else. The rebuilding and finishing of the basement of the American Hotel, just how countless number of people came together to build an insane structure in an insane location. I remember surfing on top of a 40,000 gallon water tank while it's being driven to the top of an 8-mile dirt road, or building a library in the depths of an old dynamite vault. Just the smiles and friendships that were formed during all of those things. And I remember the struggle that came with dealing with multiple floods, the frustration when contractors seemingly are never on time, but at the same time getting to explore mine shafts that haven't been explored in who knows how long. Dirt bike rides at sunset on trails that most riders can only dream of. Getting back out into nature and hiking to these cities long forgotten. Living at Cerro Gordo has truly altered the course of my life. It's forced me to become a whole new person. And it all happened in a decision. And I think sometimes when people think about life changes, they think about small moves towards something, or these long ramps to get to where they want to go. What I see more often is life changes in an instant. And no matter what you're doing, where you are, or who you are, you can make a decision today to change your life. You could decide right now to take an adventure, even if it's just to a local park, or to write the first pages of the book, or to hit the gym and make your life dedicated to fitness. And the reality is, you decide to do something and you do it even when you don't want to, and in that, your life changes. Or at least that's what it seems to me over the last 3 years here. And I hope as my time continues at Cerro Gordo, I'm able to remember that.